Okay. So like she said, my name is Neomie Tavernier. I am from Dominica, the beautiful nature isle. Currently residing in Barbados. I've been here for the last 14 years, living and working as an architect. Like I said, I did all my education in Dominica, and then I went to the States for university. I spent 5.5 years in Ames, Iowa, becoming preparing to be an architect. Because if you don't know, you can't call yourself an architect until you get registered. So now, after being here for 14 years, around 9 years in, I formally can call myself an architect, and I'm just pushing through, doing the things that I do and learning as I go along.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. So, by way of formal introduction, Neomie, she left Dominica in 2001 at the age of 18 to attend Iowa State University as an undergraduate student with the intentions of majoring in architecture. And it took her about 5.5 years because she tailored her program to her personal satisfaction. During her time, she was accepted into a design college in the spring of 2002. I keep wanting to say 2021. In the spring of 2002, on her first attempt. So she was one of 60 students selected out of 230 applicants. So congratulations on that, Neomie. I had the honor of joining the National Society of Collegiate Scholars in 2002 and experienced the spending a semester abroad in Rome in 2005. She interned in Barbados with SRM Architects Limited in the summer of 2006 prior to graduation in December of the same year. And she's been employed by SRM Architects in Barbados since 2007. So we are very proud of you, Neomie, and all that you have accomplished. And of course, we have to say, big up the Convent High School.
Yes,
Nobody don't get
combat
mad.
girls.
Don't get mad. But like me, Neomie is a graduate of the Convent High School. So we're even more proud of her because she hails from my alma mater, the Convent High School. So Neomie, just tell us a little bit more about your academic journey, how you went from convent, and how you eventually got interested in the field of architecture.
All right. So I've come up in a family full of engineers and contractors. My dad is an engineer by education. Most people know him at home for working in the field of construction, and that is something that he did for many years with my mom's dad, my grandfather, and some of my uncles. So it's really mixed on both sides in terms of that science background. So I always used to say, I wanted to do everything like my dad. I was the one, although I have a brother, I was the one who was there helping him fix things and doing all sorts of things around the house. So I always wanted to be, I said I would have been an engineer, and my hopes and my dreams were to come back and to work with my dad in construction. But we had gone and spent about a month in London on summer vacation. I had a cousin who was being christened, beautiful baby girl, Brianna. And it was during that time that in walking through London, I actually saw the Lloyds of London building. And it was in that moment that I actually said to my mom, I want to design. I don't want to do the calculations for everything else. I want to sort of be in charge of the whole design from start to finish. So subsequent to that, ending up at Iowa State, my sister actually was there doing her degree. And she said, you want to do architecture, they have a really good program. You can apply here. So I applied. Unlike most people, I applied to just one university. I got in, and maybe I think that's partly to do with the fact that my sister was already there, because they have something called being a legacy student. But long and short, I went where my sister was. And the thing about design is that you actually, although you say you want to do architecture, you don't immediately get into architecture. So you have to have a first year of general education, and then you have to apply to get into that program. So I always remember speaking with my advisor about being a little scared because, like I said, I was a science student. And in being in some of the gen eds with people whom I knew were going forward to do architecture, they had all these very artistic backgrounds and could do things that I could only dream about doing in terms of art. But I remember my advisor telling me, we look for different things. So I had done one art class and I put together my portfolio. There were some drawings in there that were they were very technical line drawings. And long and short, I applied, I got in, and the rest really was history. The program is really 5 years, but like I said, sort of wanting additional engineering background, I interchanged professional practice for actually doing base courses for the structural engineering program. And so, and that was actually initially with an intent to do a master's in structural engineering. And so that took me, doing those courses to meet my requirements took me an extra semester. So I actually didn't graduate with all of my friends. I took an extra semester just to meet those criteria. So it almost was like having a minor in engineering. And in that summer of 2006, I interned in Barbados, knowing that Barbados has, while I said I wanted to be in the region, I knew that Barbados actually had firms. Nothing against what is happening in Dominica, but Dominica doesn't have firms of that sort of size to facilitate the mentorship that I thought I needed. And so that's how I ended up in Barbados. And again, because of my work ethic, when I was done, they said to me, once you graduate, you have a place here if you want it. And so I came here, and I've been working with SRM Architects ever since. As you did mention in my bio, I was also able to do a semester study abroad. So I lived in Italy for about 4 months, doing study abroad. And that in itself was quite an amazing experience. Just being in the middle of somewhere like that with such history, it's not like picking up a book. And I'd actually done my semester project on the Colosseum. So that in itself was pretty amazing.
Wow, so pretty fascinating information, Naomi. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, before we talk about your actual work, the work that you do, I want to just stay on the topic of studying to become an architect for a minute. So, kind of just tell us, what was the ratio of male to female in your class, would you say, while
No,
you
it
were
actually it
studying?
actually was about 50-50.
Good,
So that's
good.
actually really good because this profession is
Mhm.
definitely known for the men.
Yes.
But we see it happening in the schools and more so now in the profession that women are realizing that, they can do a lot in this industry, be it
Mhm.
from a design standpoint or even in the physical construction field.
Oh, that is wonderful to hear because, one of the reasons I do this program is to inspire girls and women to think beyond the careers that are traditionally seen as careers for women. So I
Yeah.
want us to think, being an architect, I have someone I'm going to bring on who's a pilot. And I just want us to open our horizon to look at all the possibilities of what we can become in this world. So I'm very happy to hear that it was 50-50 men and women. And then something else people think a lot about in terms of architecture is that it involves a lot of math. It allows a lot of technical aspects. What was your experience with that? Does it involve a lot of math and calculations?
It does,
Mhm.
but what you also need to know that there are different calibers of schools. So there are schools that focus a lot more on the art background. There are schools that focus a lot more on the technical background, and then
Mhm.
you have schools that are a little bit more balanced. In my opinion, Iowa State is one that sort of balances the artistic aspect of it and the technical aspects, because at the end of the day, what we realize is school allows you to broaden your horizons and just go as far as you can go. But when you get into the working world, it is not that you don't need school, but it is like doing a different type of school all over again
Right.
because the work experience is so different and you're
Mhm.
dealing with different constraints. So you then have to take that sort of wide world knowledge and then bring it back together to address those various constraints. So
Mm-hmm.
you need a little bit of both. Honestly, you can't do it without the math. And again, being from a science background, that part is actually important because then
Mm-hmm.
you can understand and have a little bit of discourse with the engineers in terms of what you're trying to achieve and how to achieve it. There's
Mm-hmm.
a misconception out there that architects just design what they want and then the engineers have to figure it out. So if you have that math background and that science background, then you're already thinking on the lines of what can work, what is structurally sound.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can push the limits, but you always have to have that in the back of your mind because it makes your design stronger and it makes
Mm-hmm.
the engineers like you a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that you said while you were talking is that you are looking for a company with a particular scale. That's why you went to Barbados. You couldn't find it in Dominica. So what was missing in your search in Dominica in terms of a company you might have wanted to intern with? Because I think a lot of times we are stuck in our little bubbles and we don't know what is going on in the rest of the world. So when we have someone like you come along to kind of enlighten us of what is out there versus what we're offering in Dominica, I think we should take advantage of that. So, what would you say you were not finding in the firms in Dominica that inspired you to go to Barbados?
Well, I think Dominica does have architects, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think a lot of them are almost independent architects, if you want to call them that, not necessarily firms, but individual architects, and some who do work with firms. And I stand corrected if I'm wrong, but at the time, those some do work within engineering firms or they're affiliated with them. I do find in Dominica as well that there is a lot more focus on the importance of engineers, and I think there's a certain misconception, not only in Dominica, in the region, of really what architects do and the importance of their role. While an engineer is possibly doing structurally sound buildings, not possibly, they are, we expect them to be
Mm-hmm.
doing structurally sound buildings. Um, there are a lot of different things that architects do in terms of spatial organization and planning. It's not just all frills and making something look pretty. You know, there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of planning and development and thought and putting all the components together. And even with that correlation and coordination of how the building is supposed to be functional and experienced by people versus how the services, which you may not be seeing, how those are supposed to integrate with that experience that the person is having. So for me, I find that there needs to be some development, again, not only in Dominica, but regionally, in terms of understanding the importance of the role of the architect in terms
Mm-hmm.
of designing and buildings, especially in terms of public buildings and in terms of space development. And that experience was a little bit more available in Barbados.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In terms of the firms that are here. And to be quite honest, their fight to be recognized as a valid profession um,
Yeah,
in the island.
and I think what would help us as well is if you kind of just outline what an architect does. So just kind of outline us in terms of, okay, there's a building that needs to go up. What is your role as opposed to a structural engineer, as opposed to engineering? So I think that would help a lot in case anyone is inspired to pursue the field.
All right. So the the typical statement that we hear is, I need an architect. Do you draw plans? An
Mm,
architect is not just somebody who draws plans. That is part of what we do. And as you know, there are also draftsmen and even engineers, they draw plans.
mhm,
But an architect is really responsible for a full building from the inception of conceptualizing the project all the
mhm,
way up to managing the construction or overseeing the construction, doing the contract administration, and handing over to a client. So the general stages that we go through is that we are dealing with the client in terms of understanding what it is they want to achieve. We're doing preliminary or concept design. Then we go through into schematic design, which is more of design development, where we deal with planning processes and restrictions and all of these different things. And then we deal with doing the actual full construction drawings, which are then
Mm-hmm.
priced by a contractor. For smaller projects, if we don't have a quantity surveyor, we also manage valuations and evaluate that. We do certificates of payment. And like I said, we're going through the contract administration process. So we are looking over the contractor, ensuring the quality of what it is we've specified, all the way into handing the project over to the client. So we're literally there with the client for the entire process.
Mm-hmm. And if you notice, I pulled up one of the projects because that is the actual article that
Yeah.
came to my attention. Now, this was a historic building that you created the plan to renovate? Is that?
This is a historic building in Barbados. It's the Queen's Park House, which was the original residence of the Governor General in Barbados, and
Mm-hmm.
it was previously renovated for Carifesta. And what the renovation we did was for the second time that Carifesta was coming to Barbados. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
I was head or lead architect, if you want to call it on that, because we look at project architects and lead architects. And a lead architect may not necessarily be your design architect, but in this case, I was working as lead architect and design architect for this project on behalf of our firm. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's nothing that you do by yourself. The best work comes about with coordination. So we had a full team on here. It was not just myself. My directors were involved, Mr. Erskine Rose and Mr. Tony Selby, in terms of pulling this all together. And then we had the various consultants, the engineers, the surveyors, and then we had the contractor in there, really making the project become a reality. In speaking to my auntie Rosita, she said, you did this awesome restoration. And I said to her, no, it's a renovation, because a lot of people also don't recognize the difference. So if you have a building, a historic building, and you're looking at restoring it to a certain period, but trying to maintain everything from functionality to materials and all of those different things, then that's really a restoration. You're restoring it to what it was. This
Mm-hmm.
actually is a renovation. It has aspects of restoration, as in we have this section of the old building that is retained and restored as best possible. But we also have an extension, and the truth of the matter is that this building has gone through a change of use, where there's a gallery on the ground floor and there's a theater upstairs. So that actually makes it a
Mm-hmm.
renovation, because it's not true to the exact origins of the building. It's been expanded on, and obviously, while we do use new materials when we do things like this, you want to be clear to identify what is a restoration of the existing versus the things that are new, because you don't want to mix the two. You want them to merge seamlessly and to not be in conflict, but you definitely want them to be identifiable, as in what was from the past and what is from the current time period.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, thank you for clarifying that for us and for all the wonderful information that you're providing. And of course, if you're just tuning in, we are speaking to Miss Neomie Tavernier, Dominican born, living in Barbados. She's an architect, and she's telling us all about the differences between architecture and engineering and what goes into the process. Now, Neomie, let's just talk about some challenges that you faced along the way. Now, the first place I want to start is if there are any challenges you face as a woman in this particular field that you can tell us about.
It's one of those odd things, because I think in the Caribbean in particular, I'm not saying they don't exist, but I think in the Caribbean in particular, we're actually very good about elevating and building up our women. Like you have
Good.
Dr. Carissa Etienne, who's director
Yes.
of PAHO. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
had Dame Eugenia Charles. Here now in Barbados, we have the Honorable Mia Moore Motley as Prime Minister. So I don't know that I really dwell on being a woman in architecture now
Mm-hmm.
as much as I dwell on being a good architect, because I'm surrounded by people who always elevate me based on my performance and what I do. I understand that as a woman, and almost being a role model where people see you achieving things as a woman and they say, okay, well, I can do it too. And understanding that it is a predominantly male field. So that in itself is an achievement, but I let my work speak for me. And I am by no means silent. Sometimes my boss, he has to tell me that I need to tone it down because I'm being a little bit too rough. so,
Good for
so
you.
yeah, so I am pretty direct. I know I get that from my mom. And you just have to find that balance of, once you know what you're doing and you're sure of what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
you can get your point across and
Right.
people will respect you.
Mm-hmm.
So it is in this field, I think sometimes somebody may look at me and be like, okay, you've been in Barbados for 14 years and you're within a company, so you have some professions where you can elevate yourself through ranks um, more frequently than this one.
Mm-hmm.
So with this one, it's literally I've gone from being a student to being an intern to being a registered architect. The next step from that would probably be to be a director, whether it was in this firm or if I decided to have my own firm. So it's not to say that you achieve less just
Mm-hmm.
because your title doesn't necessarily
Sure.
grow. It's more about the projects and the responsibilities that you have. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, we do want to grow, and there are different ways to do that. But I just look at the next project because every project is important, and it's really just adding to the projects tell the story of my experience, not
Right.
necessarily because my title is never going to change from architect. I will always
Mm-hmm.
be architect, and that is really the top title that I can gain in my
Mm-hmm.
field. As I'd mentioned before, I had a thought that I wanted to do a master's in structural engineering, and when I started working, my dad actually was very unhappy that I didn't go ahead and do that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I realized that engineering is such a specific field in itself,
Mm-hmm.
and architecture is a very specific field in itself. And I have to know a little bit about everything. And the things that I don't know in depth in terms of the structure and whatnot, I rely on other professionals for that. So there's
Mm-hmm.
no need for me to have that in
The
depth knowledge
degree.
of both,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that I wasn't going to be using that structural knowledge as
Mm-hmm.
much. And as they say, if you don't use it, you lose it. So
Yep.
sometimes we have to make those decisions. I know sometimes without thinking about it, people look and they say, okay, you have a bachelor, somebody who has a master's has more than you. And that's not necessarily true. There are some professions where that master is actually, to be quite honest, it's in certain instances, it's comparable to my degree, because
Mm-hmm.
having not
Mm-hmm.
a bachelor's of arts in architecture or a bachelor's of science, actually having a bachelor's of architecture is comparable to someone who did a first degree, and so that they wouldn't have to go through a 5-year program, they would do 2 years master's to become an architect. So a bachelor's of architecture as a first professional 5-year degree is equivalent to someone who did a different bachelor's and did a 2-year master's program. And some people have to realize that because, like I said, it's a professional degree, and the B or the M doesn't make much difference unless it is that you want to go towards doing a doctorate, you want to be a teacher, and you want
Right.
to do a PhD.
Mm.
This is a profession you have to be hands-on.
And then the most important thing is that it's fulfilling to you. This is where you
It
want
is,
to
yeah.
be. This is your
Yes,
passion.
yeah,
So, there's no need to go pursue another degree if you're completely content with what you're doing and you've been doing this for 14 years. So I just wanted
yeah.
to ask you about other projects you've done and just being able to drive around Barbados and see your work on display for the entire world to see. What does that feel like?
Well, other projects I've done. So I was involved in some different things, and I almost became a niche architect, if you want to call it that. So I've assisted with some things. There were some smaller projects, like the Starcom renovations that I was involved in. And then there was a very long stretch of time from 2009 to 2013. Um, where I was really involved in doing the KFC Renovations, and that being a franchise, they have a very specific style, and very specific guidelines, which you only apply to that type of project. So we've done a lot of renovations with KFC, some completed, some not, and they do change their design packages all the time. So some of those they sort of went through a full transformation, because some were only internal, but we did have some that went through a full transformation, and that is interesting to see. I also recently completed a house, which turned out pretty nice. And I also had the opportunity to work on a project in Grenada. That project was designed by Mr. Erskine Rose, my director, but I was actually able to deal with the drawings, and then I did the full construction management for about a year and a half, going back and forth to Grenada for their NIS building, their national insurance building. So that in itself, that actually was a project that I presented to get my architectural registration, because I had worked in depth with it so much, even though I didn't really do the complete design. But that's why I say, it's all about the different aspects that you get, because you may not always be responsible for the design, but working on a project, it becomes your own as much as if you designed it yourself. And then when you get that opportunity to just do it from start to finish, that is even so much more fulfilling. But I still have a lot more to learn and a lot more to do. So it's
Absolutely.
in the
Thank you.
Caribbean, it's as the projects come.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And then I know one of the challenges you had mentioned to me is just coming back to the Caribbean. A lot of folks had challenged you to maybe find opportunities to stay in the US. So kind of just tell us about that.
Yeah, I didn't even do OPT. Like, I literally graduated and
Oh,
I
you
was
didn't?
like, I packed up and I came home, because I always knew, I said, I don't want to stay in America. America serves its
Mhm,
purpose, gave me an
mhm,
education. It gives me vacation and shopping, but I'm an island girl through and through. So I always wanted to be in the region. Like I said, either home or as close to home as possible.
mhm.
There's a sense of relief that I can take a an hour flight to get to Dominica, as opposed to
Absolutely.
planning. I mean, my parents are
Hmm.
getting older, and
Right.
it's good to have them a little bit more accessible. Can
Hmm.
you tell I'm just all about my family,
I
right?
can tell. I can tell. And of course, we want to thank everyone who's on the Facebook Live with us today, and we will be sure to take your comments in just a moment. But one of the things you mentioned, Naomi, that kind of stuck out to me as well is there are misconceptions about architecture. Are there any other misconceptions that come to mind for you?
Well, like I said, it's literally just, some people, they wonder, why do you need an architect?
Right.
Because you just draw plans.
Hmm.
And they don't understand that you're actually saving them a lot of stress by going forward in time to all the different things that can happen with your
Hmm.
project, all the different things that affect it, and then managing that process for you so that you don't have any major surprises. Now, sometimes things will pop up that you can't really control, but if you think about everything that is possible, and you plan for it and you detail it and all of these different things, then you sort of reduce that amount of unknowns. The worst thing is a renovation or a restoration, because there are things that you find only when you knock down the walls. Um,
Hmm.
so those are some that are the most difficult. But like I said, the biggest misconception is really that people don't understand the value that they get from an architect. And sometimes that saves them money, in terms of maybe using someone who's just giving them basic information. And then when something pops up that they don't know about, it increases the cost of the project, to a point where they cannot manage. So there is that factor. A lot of people say, oh, well, you're an architect, so you're making big money. I'm like, honestly, there's a lot more stress than money involved. I tell people all the time, don't have the misconception, because if I didn't love what I did, it
Hmm.
would not be worth the money that you make for it.
Exactly.
There's a lot
Exactly.
involved in this, and
Hmm.
people really don't realize the amount that
Hmm.
you take on in terms of managing a project for them and designing it. And it saves them. It really does save them headache to
Yeah.
have it done by a professional who knows everything that's involved and can really have that foresight from the beginning to the end. Because that's another
Mm-hmm.
thing, which is that a lot of people, they get fooled because they don't know how to read plans, they don't know how to understand drawings, and they can't see the finished product. So you might accept something and then you don't realize it's not what you want until it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
To be quite
Mm-hmm.
honest, now with
Mm-hmm.
advancements with 3D and all of those things, it makes it a little bit easier that you can help them to visualize. But there's still things that they're just not going to understand. So you really want to have um, that person who has your back and is
Right.
just responsible for
Mm-hmm.
everything, and they're there from start to finish. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I can tell that you're very passionate about what you do, so it comes through very clearly. So let's go over to the Facebook comments just to see what everyone is saying. So, of course, your mom is listening and watching. Jennifer says, "Hey, girl, watching you, Jennifer Lafont."
Yep.
Rosalind is watching from New York. Wilhelmine says, "Congrats, Naomi." Jamila, that's my friend and colleague. I am
Yes, she
so
works
proud of
with
you,
me.
Naomi. So please again share the live as you're watching. Ulrich Bruni says experience is the best teacher. And then Sonia Peter has a question for you. You know, before we came on, we were talking about the volcano and the impact of the volcano,
Yeah.
even on Barbados,
Yeah.
where you are, and how Barbados was covered with the ash from the volcano. So Sonia Peter wants to know, how can St. Vincent strategize their housing plan for effective rebound from the impact of the volcano on population displacement?
Wow, she didn't.
Nice to see you, Neo. Well, she calls you Neo,
Yes,
so she
yes,
knows you.
she's she does, and she didn't give me an easy one, did she? But she's a doctor slash professor, so she's all about that
Very nice.
quality.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so
Mhm,
say hi to Peter, which is another cousin. But
mhm,
yeah, it's one of those difficult things, I think, because volcanic eruptions are not, they're not standard, they're not every day. So it's really difficult to say
mhm,
how would you build to withstand a volcano. A volcano,
mhm.
I believe, is kind of one of those disasters that you really just need to be out of the way of nature.
Right.
So I don't know that you really can. So we can design to mitigate things like obviously types of windows and doors, and making sure that spaces can be airtight and they can be safe. But experiencing what we experienced in Barbados, when the ash comes, you really just want a way to make it stay outside. And at the end of the day, we're people and we need ventilation. So it's really a double-edged sword,
Mhm,
staying inside. So
mhm,
unfortunately, I don't even know how to answer that question
mhm,
100%, because there's
mhm.
some things you really cannot
Cannot plan for.
mitigate
Yeah.
around, with
Mhm,
the exception of not being in that space. We can
mhm,
design things. We can design buildings to function against earthquakes, which would be a secondary disaster that might happen, come along with volcanoes. So we're talking about
mhm.
designing seismic design in terms of making sure that our buildings can move with the shaking without cracking and all of those different things. But yes, it's about having structures that you can effectively close down, and
Mhm,
then structures that can stand the rumbling, if you want to
mhm.
call it that. But in terms of the disaster, the ash, the pyroclastic flow, you really just need to be out of the way of that.
Absolutely.
And once you clean, then life goes on.
I know, and
Um,
it's just unfortunate because this volcano keeps erupting every 100 years. So people keep
yeah,
forgetting about it, and by the time you reestablish your life, the generation after you reestablishes their life, then there comes the volcano again. So it's truly unfortunate what St. Vincent is
yeah.
experiencing right now. And Johnson Thomas just joined in. He says, "Just join in. Great topic. Thank you, Johnson. Thank you for stopping by." Now, as we get ready to wind up, Naomi, what would you say to anyone who's interested but intimidated to study architecture? Like they know they have the passion for the buildings, the design, the functionality of buildings, but they're just sort of intimidated. They're on the fence and wondering if they should pursue this as a career. What would you say to them?
I would say don't be intimidated. It's like anything else, one foot in front of the other. Like I said, when I started, honestly, I was scared. I literally said to myself, if I apply for this and I don't get in, it means I'm supposed to be an engineer.
Right.
And everything that I've done since then, when I come to a crossroads, I've literally asked that question: is if this happens, this is where I'm supposed to be. If that
Mm-hmm.
happens, I'm not supposed to be here. And my answers kept on pushing me in this direction. I think if you want to try it, just go for it and put your
Mm-hmm.
all. Like I said, they look for different criteria. No two people think the same, design the same, are the same. Just believe in yourself. But if you come to that place where you ask yourself the question and it points you in a different area, there's there's nothing wrong with changing your mind about who you want to be
Absolutely.
or what you want to do. So you really it's just one foot in front of the other, and decisions get made and life happens.
Yes, and it's so important that we hear from folks like you, because you're such an inspiration, especially to our young girls who may not have even thought about this as a career option. And Jennifer Astafan just joined in and she said, "That's my girl." So we have a
Yes.
lot of warm greetings coming in for you this evening. So again, thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your knowledge and just being an inspiration. And your mom says, "Proud of you, Neomie Tavernier. Continue working on your dreams." Kels, okay, so now we're about to wrap up. Naomi, now all the comments are coming in. So
Yes.
Kels
But the thing
John is
about
asking,
My Auntie Jenny that's the first house that I did in Dominica.
oh,
So
good for, oh, so
my
you've
Auntie
worked in
Jenny,
projects in
yes.
Dominica. I should have asked you that
Yeah.
question. You've worked in projects in Dominica?
Well, that's the first one, and there may be a few
Okay.
more on the way. Yeah.
How long ago was this?
Auntie Jenny's house was done in what, 2015?
Okay.
Yeah.
So if anyone in Dominica is looking for an architect, because I was thinking of how much of a loss this is for us in Dominica that you're in Barbados, but apparently you can work from Barbados. I mean, technology.
No,
So
well,
it,
the company, like I said, like even like Mike, well, I do some stuff. I've done that at home, and I'm open to doing things at home. But as a company, we do work
Mhm.
regionally. This company has
Okay.
projects throughout the region, so that's a great part about being in the Caribbean, is that you're not limited to where you are. So
Right.
we do work
Right.
regionally, and we have projects, like I said, in Grenada, projects in
Mm-hmm.
Guyana, a lot of things that were done before I came here. And
Mm.
yeah, lots of places. St. Lucia. This company, like I said, it's a firm, and they
Mhm.
have spread their wings, and they're definitely willing to continue to do that. So anywhere that we have jurisdiction, we will work.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for letting us know, because it didn't even cross my mind to ask that question. So thank you
Yes.
for pointing that out. So Kels John asked, how difficult is it to get the contractors and the customer on the same page as per the final product? Very good question.
Right. So it's not about getting the client and the contractor on the same page. It's about
Mhm.
me designing what the client wants and me ensuring that the contractor does what I specify. And again, that
Mm.
is something that I found is a little bit lacking in Dominica, where the contractors, they have a lot of freedom. And it happens
Mm.
here too, when you have situations with draftsmen where they don't necessarily follow the construction process. So
Mhm.
it's basically the client and the contractor, and there's no control. The
Mm.
architect creates that control to ensure that the contractor does what is specified and that
Right.
the client gets what they expect. And
Right.
there are no sort of random costs that just come up just because somebody
Mhm.
decided to do something. So we really do control the process. And like I said, that is in the interest of the client's pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So really it's a decision between you and the customer, you and the clients,
Yeah.
and then pretty much just telling the contractor what to do. So you're the boss of the contractor.
I am, yeah. I well,
Good for
not his
you.
not his boss. I just keep him in check and make
Right.
sure, yeah, make sure
Absolutely.
he's not trying to slide anything by.
Yeah,
That's why I said,
absolutely.
we do the valuations and the claims. We vet all the claims, and then we're the ones who have that final signature on the certificate of payment. So I can
Mhm.
make deductions as well,
Mm,
not
good
just
to know.
additions.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And
Yeah.
Callista asks, do you have any recommendations for building in Dominica, which is not the norm given the likelihood of hurricanes?
Um, Building in Dominica. So there are a lot of things that happen in Dominica just based off of standard practice. And working in Barbados, we have a lot of things that we do in terms of the code, the building code that is here. Now, the OSS actually does have a building code
Mm,
that's supposed to
mhm,
be used in the smaller islands. And I know that the architects and the engineers, they do follow those. But it's the same thing in Barbados, where sometimes if you just have a draftsman, they may not necessarily be thinking about those various aspects of building to a code and building to standard. And again, the town planning agencies in any country, they do regulate to a certain, they oversee to a certain extent. And the good thing about Dominica is that you pretty much have to submit construction drawings to the planning department. So
mhm,
you have those engineers there to assist and ensure that you're designing to a certain standard. Again, if you have an architect, then they can ensure that what is being built is in accordance with those specifications. So in
mhm,
terms of Dominica, there are different aspects that are types of design that are better to build in terms of hurricane resistance. And I think a lot of those have been coming out since Hurricane Maria, that
mhm,
those sort of specifications and points on how to build and roof pitches and types of construction and all of these things, that information is now out there. It's just a matter of implementing it. So you want your roof to have sufficient pitch, you want your walls to be sufficiently reinforced, and all of these different things. You know, you want to have be able to have your cross ventilation, so that you don't have effectively your windows exploding.
right.
Um, all these different things, and weatherproofing, and certain types of windows, and making sure things can shut, and lots of different things. But some things are old practice, like especially when we talk about the roof pitches. So a
Mhm,
lot of people do very shallow roof pitches because they figure they're saving money. But after Hurricane Maria,
mm,
people realized it was these older houses with a 45-degree roof pitch. Those were the
mhm,
houses that stood where their roof stayed. And that's because the
mhm,
wind is able to go over. The ideal pitch is 40 degrees, actually.
mhm.
Um, in terms of hurricanes. So that is also to tell people that you don't necessarily have to have a flat concrete roof for your house to withstand a
I
hurricane.
was about to ask you that. I was about to
So
ask you about the concrete roof that everybody wants now.
yeah, so
Mhm,
there are different ways that, again, if you have an architect, you can search the pros and cons of those different things, and they can explain to you the reasons why one thing might be more beneficial than something else. But there are regulations and there are standards that are out there with the different agencies. It's a matter of ensuring that those things get implemented on site, and that's really why you need that architect, that project manager that is supervising the construction process.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, everyone who joined us on the live as we continue to share the inspiring stories of our people. We continue to promote and celebrate who we are as Caribbean people. So, again, don't forget to follow Push Past 10. Don't forget to like and share this video so everyone can just experience a little bit of light at the end of the day, just be an uplifting moment after the end of a long week, the end of a long day. We just come over here and just relax and enjoy a wonderful conversation with an inspiring guest. So, again, my name is Simone Matthew, and it was wonderful having you on the live. Remember to preserve your peace of mind. Remember to not have anyone stress you out or anything stress you out, and always stay calm despite the difficult situations that we are experiencing in this world. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you, Neomie, for joining us again. And we wish you much success. And we hope that you will get to do a lot more projects in Dominica, because we can certainly use your expertise, especially as it relates to all the historic buildings in Dominica. I mean, I know we're about to wrap up, but it looks like the library is about to be torn down.
Yes, I have been following that a bit, and it's a little sad, but
It is sad.
the the truth of it is that it's twofold. While you
Hmm.
do want to preserve a lot of buildings, and I'm definitely for preserving. I love that library. I remember walking there. I
Yes,
used to live
all
in
our
Goodwill.
memories.
Yeah, and we used to walk down and every weekend and
Hmm.
get books. But there's a cost attached to it, and I think people need to not forget that aspect. True restoration actually costs a lot, and you have to ask yourself sometimes, are those funds coming from to do it properly? Because if you're not going to do it properly, then it's not really worth it.
Right.
So I don't think anyone should jump to wanting
Hmm.
to demolish and destroy historic buildings.
Hmm.
But sometimes your hands get tied, and I
Yeah.
understand that as well.
It's a double-edged sword, because you want to
Yeah,
restore it and renovate it, but then it's beyond the expense that you're willing to spend on it. So again, thank you,
yeah.
Naomi. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to being in touch with you.
Thank you for having
All
me.
right. All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.